Imagine being trapped in a game where your survival means someone else's death. What truly happens to the human spirit when pushed to such an unthinkable extreme? This isn't just about the money in Squid Game. It's about the deep, scarring moral cost of impossible choices and what it truly means to survive at any price. To win the Squid Game is to achieve the ultimate paradox, survival that feels indistinguishable from death. The survivor walks away with unimaginable wealth, yet stripped of the very essence that makes life worth living. In this cruel inversion of the human condition, Squid Game becomes not merely a study of desperation, but of what Nietzsche might call the aftermath of staring too long into the abyss. For in doing so, the victor carries the abyss within. Psychologically, witnessing, and especially causing, mass death in a confined, morally inverted world would corrode the foundations of one's psyche. The winner has not simply outlasted others, he has become a participant in a systematic annihilation of empathy. Schopenhauer wrote that life swings like a pendulum between pain and boredom. For the survivor, that pendulum stops. There is no return to normal suffering, because the familiar structures of meaning are obliterated. When every face you remember is one you watched die, existence itself becomes haunted. Ordinary pleasures, food, music, conversation, are drained of vitality. The brain, conditioned to survive through violence and fear, can no longer perceive safety as real. From a psychological standpoint, the survivor would likely experience a complex blend of survivor's guilt, moral injury, and existential disorientation. Survivor's guilt arises from the unbearable question, why me? While moral injury stems from the internal collapse that follows acting against one's own ethical code. The human mind, wired to seek coherence, finds none in a world where life and death were decided by a child's game. Each moment of victory recalls the screams it required. This cognitive dissonance corrodes self-identity. The survivor ceases to see themselves as fully human, or worthy of the life they preserved. We saw a version of this survivor's guilt in the show, both with Gi-hun and In-ho. Gi-hun was literally traumatized, waking up screaming every night, haunted by nightmares of the frontman. He abandoned his whole life just to put an end to the games. He could have easily boarded the plane to see his daughter, but what good would that do? Inside, he was hollow. An empty casket filled with guilt, sadness, and anger. Do you think money could fill that void? Apparently, in Gi-hun's case, it couldn't, and even if he had met his daughter, it might have brought him a brief moment of happiness, but eventually their relationship would have deteriorated. Gi-hun would grow distant and cold, and Ga-young would eventually realize something was deeply wrong with her father. And from Gi-hun's perspective, could you really raise a child in a world that treats human death as entertainment? Once you've seen such horrors, you can never truly go back. This is why I believe In-ho never spoke to his brother and ultimately accepted the role of the frontman. He and Gi-hun are two sides of the same coin, born from similar backgrounds and circumstances, but having chosen two very different paths in life. Though no perfect parallel exists to the deadly games, two real-world analogs offer insight. First, the phenomenon of survivor guilt among trauma victims and combat veterans. As noted above, survivors often struggle with guilt and meaninglessness even when they return safe. Second, the case of large lottery winners. Studies show that winning a large prize improves overall life satisfaction, but does not necessarily increase day-to-day happiness or mental health in proportion. One study found that 2 years after a medium lottery win, mental well-being improved modestly, 1.4 GHQ points, but that was far from a panacea. These findings highlight two things. A windfall changes one's evaluative view of life, better off, on paper, but it doesn't automatically heal internal trauma or restore meaning. Winners can still suffer isolation, identity crisis, paranoia, loss of purpose. Anecdotal accounts show that a surge in wealth may provoke sudden wealth syndrome, a state of emotional and psychological unpreparedness. Now, the counter-argument. Many will say, but the winner received 456 billion won. That money changes everything. Why focus on trauma when epic wealth awaits? Indeed, the prize must be factored in. Wealth can relieve many external pressures: debt, insecurity, illness, lack of opportunities. Studies show large lottery winners report higher life satisfaction over a decade. But here's the caveat. Material relief does not equal moral or psychological relief. The winner may ask, is the money enough to pay for the ghosts I now host? The trauma of the games is not simply paid off by cash. The axiom, money changes everything, falls short when what's broken is the self, the capacity to trust, the capacity to feel normal, the capacity to live without the hush of past screams. Wealth may buy comfort, but it cannot buy innocence back. Furthermore, if the winnings become the defining identity, I am the survivor who has wealth, then the winner remains tethered to the trauma by their social role. Friends may come for the money, not the person. Relationships may shift into transactions. The isolated victor may trade one kind of emptiness, the survival void, for another, the wealth void. And as lottery studies show, improved satisfaction does not necessarily translate into heightened happiness or full psychological well-being. Nietzsche's will to power provides a haunting lens here. In the game, survival becomes the ultimate expression of will, an unrestrained assertion of life at all costs. Yet once the contest ends, that same will turns destructive. Having conquered death's shadow, the survivor finds no higher purpose. Without struggle, existence feels hollow, meaningless. The instincts that ensured survival now devour the self from within. The Übermensch ideal collapses under the weight of blood-stained victory, revealing that pure will, detached from compassion, leads not to transcendence, but to spiritual ruin. Freud might describe the aftermath as the dominance of the death drive, a subconscious pull toward self-destruction. Having endured trauma so total, the psyche seeks to repeat or undo it. The winner may sabotage relationships, isolate themselves, or engage in reckless behavior, not out of malice, but as an unconscious attempt to reconcile with their own survival. Jung would call this the shadow, overwhelming the ego, the dark, repressed aspects of the self now unleashed. The survivor's dreams, filled with the faces of the dead, serve as nightly confrontations with that shadow, proof that no wealth can purchase redemption. And yet, there is a tragic beauty in this condition. Existential philosophers like Sartre or Camus might argue that such a survivor now sees the absurdity of life more clearly than anyone else. Having witnessed the raw mechanics of human desperation, they can no longer hide behind illusions. In Camus' terms, they are condemned to live without appeal, to accept that meaning must be created, not given. But few possess the psychological resilience to bear that truth. For most, the trauma calcifies into numbness, a state closer to Nietzsche's last man than the awakened spirit. The winner becomes a ghost haunting their own life, alive, but not living. There is an incredible book called Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, in which he describes his experience in concentration camps and how people actually survived those horrific places. Those camps are, in a twisted way, the real-world Squid Game. If you are interested in that subject, I highly recommend reading it. In the end, all the survivors chose to cherish life, rather than succumb to the horrors they endured. It's true that the pain is always there, but they chose not to forget it. Instead, they used it as fuel to live life to its fullest potential. This is what movies like Saw also tried to convey. There are countless studies suggesting that people living in war zones, or those who work in life-threatening professions, often feel more alive than those living peaceful, predictable lives. Some interviewers and soldiers who were deployed in war zones have even said that after returning home, they truly began to live for the first time. But here's the catch. In all those cases, whether in Saw, in concentration camps, or on the battlefield, you were the victim, not the perpetrator. Even if in Squid Game you are still a victim of circumstance, the fact that you killed others to survive changes everything. You didn't just endure horror, you participated in it. That moral awareness poisons any sense of peace you might find afterward, because you can't fully separate your survival from the suffering you caused. You didn't just escape death, you became part of its machinery, and that's a burden no amount of money can erase. So, could a winner of Squid Game ever truly live again? Perhaps only in fragments, perhaps only by confronting, not escaping, the horror of what survival demanded. Healing would require what Jung called individuation, integrating the darkness rather than denying it, to look in the mirror and accept both the killer and the victim within. Few could achieve such reconciliation. Most would find that winning the game was merely the beginning of another, an endless inner contest between memory, guilt, and the faint hope of rediscovering humanity. In the end, Squid Game offers no comfort. It whispers a truth older than philosophy itself, that survival without meaning is another form of death. And in surviving the game, one does not escape it. The game simply moves inside.